Rowan of Rin, Chapter 3 The Heroes. After inspecting the cut on her son's forehead, however, Jiller simply smiled and shrugged. It was nothing serious, she said, and could be attended to at home later. All children had to put up with such things at one time or another. Rowan knew that her words were for him as much as for Strong John and Marley. She was reminding him to be brave, as befitted of a child of Rin, and not to fuss. Rowan knew that Jiller worried about his nervousness and frailty. He had overheard her telling Strong John so outside their house only a month or two ago. She tried to be patient, Jiller had said, but Rowan was so different from herself and from his father and even from sturdy little Aloud that it was sometimes very hard. She did not understand him. She wished his father were alive. Rowan had crept away and scuttled upstairs to his room he now shared with Aloud. He had lain on his bed for quite a time, not really thinking about anything, aware only of a dull ache in his chest. So now he stood beside his mother with swimming head and burning eyes and said nothing. He longed to throw himself into her arms and cry for comfort, but there would be no comfort there, only shame. "I told you Sheba was a waste of time," Brondon was saying, half in triumph, half in exasperation. "Now she has 2 of our best cheeses in her grubby paws, and we are none the wiser." "Never mind," Alan said, shrugging. "We decided to try her, and try we did. Now a new decision must be taken. For we all cannot climb the mountain. Who is to go?" "I will go!" shouted Brondon. She glared at them all as though daring someone to oppose her. "Why not?" Strong John said. "No one doubts your willingness, your courage, or your right, Brondon. As, I presume, no one doubts mine. I, too, will go." Rowan felt as though it was being gripped by an icy hand. He remembered Sheba's words. "The mountain will not test your strength, John. It will destroy it." "No!" he gasped. His mother's hand tightened on his arm. "And I," said Marley firmly, her eyes on Brondon. Val and Ellis had been talking quietly together. Now Val raised her gruff voice. "Until the mill wheel turns again, we have no work to do," she said. "So we will join you on the mountain. Better that than sit idle waiting." "You could do a bit of house cleaning for a change," Alan teased. Val stared at him coldly, while some of the other villagers exchanged amused glances. Everyone knew that Val and Ellis did not like anyone to make fun of their fussy housekeeping. "This is madness," cried Neil the potter, unable to keep silent any longer. "This is no laughing matter. Brondon, John, Marley, Val, Ellis, the strongest of us all, going into the unknown." He appealed to the crowd. "If they do not come back, these hotheads, how are we to survive? What will happen to the Xebec if the Xebec invade us once more, or if some other dreadful danger threatens?" "Another dreadful danger does threaten, Neil," Old Lon said. "Right now, as we stand here, perhaps the most dreadful we have ever faced. To save the village from it, some of us must journey into the unknown. That is exactly why the strongest must be the ones to go." She turned to John. "Still, I think the party is too small as yet. You need one more." Alan stepped forward. "I agree. I will join the company to make the numbers even." He saw Brondon open her mouth to object and went on quickly. "Ah, Brondon, I know I'm only a half-bred of Rin, and my strength may not match yours. But I am not quite a weakling. I have mastered, I think, all the skills the journey will require. And I have other gifts to offer, thanks to my father's blood. A cool head, for one. A good way with a campfire, for another. And a stock of songs and jokes that will not go astray. Besides, with the millers absent and no flour to be had, how else will a poor baker occupy us these next few days?" "You could come and dig my garden, Alan," piped up Sarah, his mother. There was a shout of laughter from the people around. The old woman smiled. Only Rowan and Alan saw that her hands were gripping her apron, twisting the white cloth, and that her eyes were twinkling not with laughter, but with unshed tears. She had lived long enough to have heard the old stories of the mountain and to fear its power, and Alan was her only child. But like a true daughter of Rin, Sarah knew how to hide her feelings. Only once, many years ago, had she let down her guard, and that was when she had fallen in love with the man who had become Alan's father, a laughing, brown-eyed singer who came to the village one autumn with a troop of travelers. Rowan had heard the story many times, though the thing had happened many years before he was born. when his mother and father were children themselves. It was part of the village history and was repeated every time a tribe of travelers came to a camp nearby. Rowan could imagine the shock it must have caused when it became known that Sarah, the sensible village teacher, would leave Rin to marry a footloose traveler. Most people were horrified and tried to make her change her mind, but she would not be persuaded, and when the travelers moved on, she went too, leaving the peace and security of her old home to wander with the man she loved and his tribe. The people of Rin saw Sarah a few years after that when the travelers chanced to come their way again. The small, cheeky-faced Aloud was toddling after her by then, and her happiness was in her face for all to see. Some shook their heads and said her smiles would not last, and they were right, though not for the reasons they thought. For then came the 5-year War of the Plains, and when again the people of Rin, the Marisfolk, and the travelers themselves were forced to join in battle against invaders from across the sea, their ancient enemy, the Xebec. As their ancestors had done before them, they at last drove the Xebec back from their lands. But the battle was long and cost many brave lives, and one of those was Sarah's husband. Sarah brought her young son back to the village after that. Without her man, the traveling life had no sweetness for her, and she wanted to settle again with her own people in her old home. But home for Aloud was the colored tents of the travelers, the smell of campfires burning in the night, open plains, forests, winding roads that seemed to have no ending. Slender, dark-eyed, and curly-haired, Aloud was the image of his father, and very different from the tall, strong children of Rin. Under the teaching tree with Brondon, Giller, Val, Ellis, and the others of like age in those days, he had held up his head and smiled at their glances, nudges, and whispers. Outside school, though, he worked hard to seem like them as possible. He soon learned that his strength was no match for theirs, and that his wits were his best weapon. Rowan had often felt that Aloud might be the one person in the village who understood how he felt, since he too was weaker and different from the others. Not that Aloud had ever said so, but when he visited the house with Marley and Strong John, he often told jokes with Rowan, and took an interest in what he was doing, and made excuses for his mistakes. And now Aloud too was to climb the mountain, trying yet again to prove himself a worthy citizen of Rin. John and Marley were looking pleased, and Brondon was rolling her eyes at Val and Ellis, clearly not liking the 6th member of the party, but unable to think of a good reason to deny him. Funny, easy-going Aloud the baker was going to vanish with the others into the secret maze of cliffs and forests that rose above them. Once more Rowan remembered Sheba's mocking face. "Ah, well, if you must go, you must. My weeds will have to thrive for another few days," old Sarah was calling, smiling and flapping her hands in mock despair, while her eyes still shone with tears. "Bless you, mother," said Aloud. His tone was light, but the love and admiration in the words were clear for all to hear. "Now," said John hastily, for he was a man embarrassed by strong feelings openly expressed, "I suggest we go home and make our preparations for the journey. Then a good night's sleep should be had by all before the dawn is upon us. Agreed?" The others nodded. The villagers called out their good nights and began slowly to move homeward. Some felt comforted because something was being done to solve the problem that had come upon them so unexpectedly to spoil the calm progression of their days. Some felt excited, even envious at the thought of the great adventure waiting the chosen ones. But many, like Neil, went to their beds that night with heavy hearts because the leaders and heroes of the village were going on a dangerous quest for their sakes and might never return. When Aloud had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the excitement, Rowan lay awake in his bed, looking out the window at the huge bulk of the mountain. The moonlight was very bright, but the mountain loomed black against the sky, secret and full of mystery. Giller had cleaned the cut on his forehead, but his head still ached, and Sheba's jeering words of warning tormented him. He tried every way he could to turn his thoughts to pleasant things. To Star, to the new calf soon to be born in the herd, to the taste of cool blue juice from the hopeberry trees, and to the memories of the mother of his babyhood, a gentler, happier Giller, singing to him. But always, just as he was about to fall asleep, the other darker thoughts came creeping back and made him afraid to close his eyes. Finally, he did sleep, a shallow doze filled with nightmares. He was back in Sheba's hut, but now its 4 walls were made of rock, dripping with water and slime. And Sheba was huge, her nose long and pointed, her hair greasy gray tails swinging like thick ropes around her grinning face, her eyes red and piercing. Strong John and his mother stood there with him, but they made no move to help as the witch bent toward him, closer and closer, till her face was all he could see and her breath scalded his cheeks. "If you are the only one afraid, Skinny Rabbit, you are the only one with any sense," she croaked. And she opened her mouth to scream with laughter, but she had no tongue, and the inside of her mouth was as yellow and smooth as cheese.